that professional learning that you can access within there. It also helps you differentiate instruction so that students are able to be more successful more often, which is what we want. And it helps you to see connections so that you can focus on those big ideas without getting sort of stuck in the mire of the details, is what Small says. So it's developed by research, it's Canadian, there's like 12,000 students involved. It's developed using the Canadian curriculum, although not specifically the Ontario curriculum. It does cover all 5 strands of the math curriculum, and there are curriculum correlations, so if you're interested in that, I can share those links with you. But it's important to remember that it's a developmental continuum, unlike our curriculum.
Okay.
So they're connected, but not the same. So you can't say if a student's working in phase 3 that they're working at a grade 3 level, because you might have students in phase 3 in grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, grade 7, grade 8.
Does it go grade by grade, or is it like
No.
up? Okay. Because I just said different says grade 1, so I was just thinking.
No, I think that was the kit that belonged in the grade 1 room.
Okay.
So
it's like primary, junior, intermediate?
it's one kit,
Oh.
which encompasses
strand?
kindergarten through 7.
Okay.
Yes. So technically, it's kindergarten through 7, although lots of grade 8 teachers are using it.
Yeah.
Because if your
So
students
beneficial
aren't
for
there
them, yeah.
developmentally, it certainly gives you opportunity to do something about them. So every kit is the same. Every kit has these huge maps, overview, and these are the ones. It also has diagnostic tools. So let's look at this one. It has diagnostic tools, and it has backgrounds and strategies book. So it's got the maps. It's got the guide to using the developmental maps. It's got the backgrounds and strategies book, and it has the diagnostics. But that one was not.
How many of these do we have?
It's a good question.
Clint, do you know how many of these we have?
There's a couple at least.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this one says grade 1 and this one says grade 2, so it's I don't know if every grade level has one. But all the kits are the same. They all have the same pieces and use them all the same way. So the developmental maps, there are actually 2 of them. One is the visual and one is the indicators. But the thing to notice here, just for our purposes, is that they take each strand and divide it up into essential concepts and essential skills. So for every strand of math, they look at a number of concepts that students develop as they move through the phases of this particular strand. And then they look at specific skills that students develop as they move through the phases.
So this is like from 1 to 7, like this continuum, or?
It's from, this one for number is 1 to 5.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not related to the grade level.
Okay.
Okay, so I taught grade 6. I would have had students working in phase 3, phase 4, and phase 5.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And the
even
idea
as far
is
as
to
like
move
giving them the
students forward.
diagnostic, like
Yeah.
is there a certain like
Yep.
one that you're supposed to choose depending on?
There is, and
Oh,
we'll get there.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to talk about these key concepts and key skills. So key skills are the tools that students use to help them work with the concepts. So in this case of number, the key skills students work on are counting, comparing numbers, and using conventional symbols to describe numbers. So those are the 3 skills they're working on through these phases to support these concepts of numbers tell how many or how much, classifying numbers provides information about the characteristics of the numbers. There are different but equivalent representations of a number. We use a number system based on patterns and benchmark numbers. So as students are moving from beginner to flexibility with number, they develop all of those different concepts. Their understanding of those concepts develops and becomes more sophisticated. So when we talk about being in a phase, what that means is that sort of describes the level of math sophistication that child has. So if a child is in phase 2 in number, it means they're really concrete. So basically they're comfortable working with whole numbers to 100 that are modeled concretely. They're not ready to talk about numbers greater than 100 yet, and they're not ready to talk about numbers without that concrete modeling in front of them. By the time a student works through phase 4 into phase 5, so phase 4, they're comfortable with whole numbers greater than 1,000, fractions and decimals. By the time they're in phase 5, they're flexible with numbers. So any number they can work with, they have a conceptual understanding of what fractions, whole numbers, decimals, they're able to work with any number. So you can probably think about kids in your grade 8 class who are still
Yeah.
working on this,
Definitely.
right? They don't have flexibility with decimals or fractions
Yeah.
or big numbers, right? So you can see how it may not align. So that's just what we looked at here. So here's how you figure out the diagnostic tool. In the front, I think it's on page 4, it might even be sooner than that, right in the front.
Here.
The next one, right at the top.
Oh.
Here, it gives
Yeah.
you sort of the general suggested grade level. So if you're working grade 7, I would give G.
Mhm.
Grade 8, I would give G. I may not do it with all of my students in grade 8. I would do it sort of with those students that I want to learn more about, that
Yeah.
I'm my students of mystery, you might say. And the idea is that lots of them, if you look at that previous page, there's overlap within each of the diagnostic tools. So tools C and D, for example, both cover phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4.
Right.
They'll identify students in phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. And same with E, F, and G. E, F, and G all identify students in phase 4 or phase 5. So you might find if G is too difficult, if a student is unable to
Yeah.
find success, you might go back to F.
Okay.
What grade are you teaching?
4.
Okay. So you're good to go with with C or D depending.
C or D, okay.
A and B, if you ever end up in primary, A and B are interviews. So it's a little more challenging for teachers to do that, right? It's much easier to give that paper pencil, which is what you'll be giving.
Okay.
But A and B are interviews. So the other piece to consider is if you're looking for, to work with a student on IEP who's not working at grade level, I would consider what grade level they're working at
Okay.
and give them that, even if it means giving them an interview.
I was gonna say, so it could be the interview.
Yes. And I would say,
Excuse me.
if you have a student who you know would benefit from an interview, but they don't need that level, so you could always do a test orally with
Yeah,
the student,
yeah.
right? There's no reason you couldn't do that. Does that make sense, sort of how you know where to go?
Yep.
And then you're just going to photocopy the test and give it out. That part's not hard. Anybody, right to this point, everybody's good, right? We're good. The trick becomes then scoring the assessment. So choose a question, but I chose a question for you. So here's a question off of Tool E. Would 703 be a big enough number to describe all the people living in a city? Explain your thinking. So let's try and answer. What would you say? Would 703 be a big enough number to describe all the people living in a city?
Actually, I have a specific question from a class last year. One of the kids said no because my school has this many kids in it, and I know that the city is a lot more than whatever or something like that.
Than the number of students at my
Yeah,
school.
yeah,
That's a good comparison.
yeah.
So, having done this a number of times and moderated it a number of times, students generally know that no, it's not a big enough number, but they have trouble actually articulating why. So the trick with scoring prime is that the scoring guide is very, very, very tight. So this one says they get 2 points for knowing that 703 would not be big enough to describe all the people in a city with a reasonable explanation that shows a sense of the number 703. So that kid that said there's
Yeah,
500 kids,
yeah.
like that was the perfect answer, right?
Okay.
So that kid got a 2. I would say most students are able to get a 2 because they are able to articulate that piece.
Yeah.
Is 2 the highest?
Yeah, in this case, that child would get 0. If they said no, but they weren't able to give a reasonable explanation, even though they no is the correct answer, they get 0 points. So let's look at another example.
So if they just say no, you mean because
they
they're
get
not
0
explaining
points.
it? Okay.
Because the prime is set up specifically to look for conceptual understanding. And so in order for this child to show that they have the concept of benchmarks, they have to be able to articulate where that benchmark would be. So other questions though, here's one. They get 1 point for an answer of about 4 or almost 4, and a second point for an explanation that shows blah, blah, blah. Or they can get 2 points for this kind of an answer. So this one says they get 2 points for this, or 1 point for just this.
Okay.
So the scoring of it is just a bit tricky at first, and I would suggest you probably want to moderate it the first couple of times you do it. So
Okay.
work with somebody else, call me, work with a partner that's doing it as well, because there are some that are trickier to score than others depending on all kinds of things, right? And it's not as easy as check X, right?
Yeah.
You sort of have to really think about it because you really are considering what's the student thinking.
Okay.
Okay? So once you've done all of the scoring, you're going to determine the student's total score, and then you use the phase chart that's there to determine what phase they're in. So for this assessment, if they scored between 7 and 16, they're in phase 2. If they scored less than 7, it says they're likely in phase 1, but you actually need to do another diagnostic tool in order to determine precisely where they are. Okay? And then I'm just going to show you how to walk through the book, because this is sort of the introduction part about how to use the diagnostic, but this is not the tricky part of using Prime. The tricky part of using Prime is now, what do I do with all this data that I've collected? Because what you'll end up with is this great, and I can share with you, a great color-coded spreadsheet of where everybody's working, but that doesn't help you with programming, which is really the purpose here, right? To think about what's the next best step for that student.